Bill McClintic, author of this new book, and what is it about Judas of Iscariot that sparked your interest and got you on this path to write this book?
Well, I was in seminary pursuing studies to become an Episcopal priest. And one evening while I was reading the New Testament, the Gospel of Mark in particular, the first one written, I came across a verse that said, talking about the betrayal, take him and lead him away safely. That's in the 44th verse of the 14th chapter. It was that word safely that upended years of belief. Safely conveys no danger or risk is involved, and that there should be no harm or injury. Safely also conveys security. Safely has a connotation of giving protection, of safety, that nothing bad will happen. By the way, the sense of hold him fast in Matthew 26:48 is the same.
Who is Judas Iscariot?
He was a scribe. He was a teacher. He was an accountant. Those are duties of a scribe at that time. Part of his background in the accounting was the handling of money. So he had to have, as John says, a bag or purse, if you will.
Would you hang out with him?
Oh, absolutely.
What is it about him that attracts you? I mean, is it...
His loving character, I guess. He had a lot of warmth, I feel. He liked to talk. He liked to draw people out. He wanted to find out about people. Sort of like I had a need to find out about Judas.
The story that we all heard, 30 pieces of silver, he sells Jesus down the river, and then he goes hangs himself.
Well, there's no specific injunction in the scriptures of that time against suicide. It just wasn't done. In fact, Josephus, who was almost a contemporary of Judas, calls suicide self-murder, stating that it's a crime. And, quote, an instance of impiety against God, our Creator. The account of the death of Judas, written in Acts, states, and falling headlong, he burst asunder in the midst, and all his bowels gushed out. Acts doesn't call it a suicide. And this account agrees with the writings of Papias, an early church bishop, whose writings tell of Judas wandering the Holy Land after the crucifixion, finally facing death in much the same way as told in Acts, sometimes almost word for word. There's a discrepancy in the Bible.
And how did that happen?
Well, the Bible was written by man, and man is fallible.
The book itself is talk about. I mean, it's large print. It's not a normal read. It's written in 2 columns.
It's written in 2 columns, much after the fashion of the Tyndale Bible, which was first published in the 1500s. I felt that it was easier to follow that format where the left-hand column has the text and the right-hand column has my commentary or footnote type of information that normally would be found at the end of the book, at the bottom of the page. This way the reader doesn't have to go searching.
And it's also in a large print format.
Yes, it's in large print, so it's easy to read. The purpose of this book, to me, is to change the image of Judas, to bring forth those things that will change our concept of the passion story, if you will. That Judas was not a betrayer. Um, Judas was the beloved disciple. It was Judas who was with Mary at the cross. It was Judas who Jesus looked down and said, "Mother, behold thy son," and said to Judas, "Behold thy mother." And from that hour he took her into his home. That goes back to his early childhood, to his very early upbringing, that he was raised in a home surrounded by love. And I feel that it was Judas who probably said to Jesus, "Tell us the great commandment."
Who is this book geared towards? I mean, who is your target audience?
The target audience is the average individual person, because that's all I am, an average individual person. One of the things that I learned was not answers, but where to find answers. Research. And research has been my biggest ally in writing this book. I've been a teacher, worked for businesses, owned businesses. So some of my background is in teaching and writing. Some of my own persona in those areas is part of my depiction of Judas. Yes, I've done extensive travel. Been to the Holy Land 3 times. Been to Rome a couple of times doing research. Been to England doing research in the British Museum there.
So you're not just your average Joe walking down the street going, "Hey, I'm going to write a book."
No.
Judas, the beloved disciple remembered. Any story behind the title?
It started out as I, Judas, was going to be a stream of consciousness approach, like James Joyce in Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Then it got changed to Judas 101, where I was going to assume my persona as a university professor, if you will, and I got, probably a third of the way through, and it just did not feel right. I guess I need to point out that I have a strong religious bent. My efforts in writing this book helped me to rebuild my faith. And I said, well, I didn't say, he told me, you need to get this done. It wasn't until after I was done that I realized I was never called to the priesthood. I was called to write the book. That he wanted to get the record set straight, if you will.
Anything that you wanted to say that I didn't ask you?
No, I think I've said enough.